First obligation of the legislature every year is to pay the state debt and finance education. After that, they can go home.
But they rarely do.
They never do. Would be nice sometimes.
Yeah, it would be.
So the first thing you have to do is pay the debt. And we have a lot of bond issues that have been issued and gone through for many, many years. So we have a lot of bond issue money out there that we have to pay the interest on and reduce the principal every year. And then after that, we have probably to throw money into the education formula, the school foundation formula. One of the questions that we'll have to see, I think, is probably whether they will fully fund this year's increment.
That's, in fact, that's one of the things I've been asking almost every time with when you talk about the budget. The budget has been so poor that Governor Nixon has taken over cut over $600 million from it. Well, while they've cut everybody else, they've continued to increase funding to education for this new funding formula that they have. Can they still do that? I think that's going to be one of the big questions. And everybody over at the Capitol, governor, legislative leaders want to fund education, but can they continue to make payments? Will they have to just hold education where it is right now, or would they even have to cut it? Now, nobody's really talking about cutting it, but the budget obviously will be big. I think on my side, House Speaker Ron Richard, I cover the House primarily. House Speaker Ron Richard was the former Economic Development Chair, big on jobs. That's always been his main focus legislatively, and there'll be other job stimulus packages in conjunction with the governor. That'll be big, and ethics legislation has become a major topic.
It really has. Let me go back to the school foundation formula for a second. Cutting the school foundation formula or reducing the amount of the segment that goes in this year is going to be very difficult politically, simply because this has become such a political issue. And it became a political issue when Matt Blunt ran for governor after Bob Holden withheld money from public education and said that he would never cut education funding. I think Governor Nixon also said he would never cut education funding. So it's a political issue more than a practical issue at this point. The state Senate probably has much the similar agenda that the House has. It also is going to have an ethics package. It's also going to be talking about jobs. I think ethics is going to be the one thing that is going to be most interesting to watch, because there are several possibilities out there for legislation, and they approach it from some different angles, and how they get these things together and whether they can get them together into one bill, and then whether they have the guts enough to pass it is going to be something else. Next question, though, with ethics is, and I keep asking this of all the people who say they're going to introduce bills, would this have kept the people who are going to prison from doing what they did? And they all say, well, no, it won't. What they did was break the laws, and these bills would not have kept them from doing that. Okay, so you've got the major ethics issues that have come up in the last year, but all of the ethics bills are introducing don't address the issues that these people got themselves into.
I mean, we've had some fairly serious charges, some sexual charges, some federal election charges, bribery charges. Mm-hmm. Those are, and we've had a fair amount.
Yeah, you stick around this place long enough, as I have, and you see people who go to prison for one thing. I've seen two speakers of the House go to prison, and we have a former Speaker of the House who's in really deep water down in Cape Girardeau now. I've seen an Attorney General go to prison. I've seen members of the legislature go to prison for everything from bribery to dealing drugs. So when you're around long enough, you see enough of this going on. The thing is, though, we're talking about how many people, Brent? 5 or 6 in this?
I was trying to count it up in my head. Yeah. I'll do math.
But that's this is out of 197 members of the General Assembly. So we're talking maybe half a dozen people out of 197. And so people are going to look at the 6 people and say, well, they're all crooks in Jefferson City. And actually, most of the people that I think we deal with are pretty hardworking folks, and most of them are pretty straight folks. And with all the different competing ideas in the General Assembly, sometimes it's amazing things do get done. But I think what we're talking about here in terms of ethics is certainly the exception more than the rule.
In your capacity as reporters, there's some watchdogging that goes on. Let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about maybe shop talk a little bit. What's our current status in terms of the Capitol Press Corps? I know nationally the newspaper industry has been hit hard. I mean, do we still have as many people covering the legislature? What's changed there?
We don't have even as many as since I started, let alone since you started.
No. We have... when I started at the Capitol, there were 2 viable wire services. Kansas City and St. Louis both had 2 viable newspapers, and we had other newspapers that were sending people in. Right now, the Capitol Press Corps consists, as we speak, of 1 person in the Kansas City Star Bureau. I don't know if he'll have any help during the legislature. The Jefferson City News Tribune has an office, and their people come in and out. The Columbia Tribune has someone that comes down, not here 24 hours a day. The Springfield News Leader, I don't know if they're going to have anybody this time.
They've talked about it. They have a very good
reporter
but whether he gets to come back to the Jeff City.
The Joplin Globe used to have somebody here. They don't have anybody here now. St. Joseph, their reporter who covered the last 2 or 3 sessions, has left. We haven't heard if they're going to send anybody down here. The Associated Press has 2 people. Normally during a legislative session, they get at least 1 more for legislative relief.
And they will this year, because I just talked with one day. And they didn't know if they would. And when AP worries about funding is...
And the Post-Dispatch has 2 people, and they usually add at least 1 during a session. We don't know if that's going to happen because Lee Enterprises is having a lot of trouble. And then there's the Missourinet with our 4 people. Unfortunately, we have been able to hang in there and keep all 4 of our folks this year, and we'll be going into next year at full strength. So there's no doubt about what we'll be doing.
There's fewer people.
Well, given the ethics situation that you guys mentioned a few minutes ago, this seems like a bad time not to have a strong Capitol press corps.
Well, you're not going to find any disagreement from us.
No.
Well, I think primarily, Steve, too, with that, I think local reporters are, I mean, we look at the whole state, and but when local reporters are looking at what their specific delegation is doing, they have more time and effort and focus on maybe somebody doing something a little bit shady or questionable, whether it's, actually illegal or not, but questionable, and they can report on that, whereas we'd give it a pass because we may say, well, it's not statewide interest or something like that. And I think that's one thing we're missing that we had more of when I first got here.
Yeah, one of the things that is really dismaying is what has happened at the local level in terms of newspaper reporting and broadcast reporting.
Right, yeah, even in our industry.
Yeah, in radio, we don't have the news departments in local radio that we used to have, and a lot of the people who are now doing news in local radio also are doing sports and the morning talk show. And
but they weren't covering the legislature.
They weren't covering the legislature, no, but they were people who were covering local government. They were covering City Hall and the courthouse, and they were covering the local representative and the local senators, and they had some familiarity with these people. And if something was going on up here that involved them that was a little bit questionable, the folks back at the local news media, the local papers, local radio stations could jump on them. Can't do that anymore because those people no longer exist in too many markets. And when the majorities and the minority numbers in the House and Senate have gotten closer together, the partisanship has increased. And because the partisanship increases, then you're going to find people who are going to stake out positions on issues instead of working together to resolve the issue, as we used to have quite often in many respects in the past. So that is one of the things we've seen. I think we've seen a huge increase in partisanship. I think that's gotten in the way of solving a lot of problems and a lot of issues, but there are issues out there. One thing we've noticed, though, is in the last several years, we've noticed less participation, at least I have, less participation by average citizens in the committee process. We used to be able to go to committee meetings, many of which were held at night, and a lot of private citizens would come in and testify and take part. Now when we go to committee meetings, which are almost all held during the daytime when people can't get off work and come in, we're hearing from the lobbyists, we're hearing from the organizations that are able to organize busloads to bring in here, but we're not hearing the citizen's voice as much as we used to.
Why?
That's a structural thing. Why is it? Part of the reason is...
the daytime thing?
I think part of it is a daytime thing.
That can't be an accident.
No, well, partly not. But the fact is, in those days, we didn't have very many committee hearing rooms. And so we would have daytime meetings. But we also had a lot of nighttime meetings because we didn't have rooms to put everybody in. And so there were a lot of meetings at night when people could come in. Now we have more committee hearings, more committee rooms anyway, and so they're able to do these committee hearings at the convenience of the members of the General Assembly, so they don't have to work in the Capitol at night unless they want to. At least they don't have to attend committee meetings at night. So I think the loser is the voice of the common citizen who could come to Jefferson City and testify if they wanted to. And I think that that's one of the weaknesses of our present system.